All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast today. I'm incredibly excited. I have a legend in the house, Daron K. Roberts. How you doing, my man?
Man, doing well. I'm blessed. Everything's good, and glad we can make this happen. I love your content. Love what you stand for. So, thanks for having me on, Derek.
You're welcome. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. So I like to tell the story of my guest before really getting into any of the ideas or themes we want to talk about. So you were born and raised in Texas. I saw that you were a stud, strong safety in high school, a 4-year president of your class. You know, it seems like leadership was kind of in your DNA from day one. Can you talk a little bit about that experience growing up in Texas?
Yeah, I grew up in East Texas. Rural town in East Texas. I'm a fifth generation East Texan. My parents are from there, and my dad's a Baptist minister. My mom was an elementary school principal. And, for me, the goal at that time was to become the governor of Texas. So I tried to involve myself um, in as many leadership experiences that I thought that I could learn from. I had a lot of good mentors, coaches, teachers who sort of showed me what the building blocks of leadership look like. And, those were the formative years in my life and really helped me to develop.
I love that. And you took those leadership lessons with you to the University of Texas in Austin, which from what I hear is just an incredible place. I've actually never even stepped foot in Texas yet. I'm slowly getting down from Wisconsin to Kansas. Texas will be soon. Um, but can you talk about your years as a Longhorn and what culminated as you once again becoming president of the largest student body class in the entire nation?
Yeah, so we got to get you down here. I mean, you've got to come on an away game,
Oh,
some sport, pick a sport. We got to get you down here. But Austin's a great place. For me, it was 5 hours away from home. It was a capital city. It was vibrant. It was open-minded in terms of accepting people as they were. Went into UT in 97, and the things I thought that I knew was that I wanted to go to law school, wanted to be governor, wanted to get into politics, and Austin really provided, I thought, the perfect combination for all of those things. So ran for student body president my last year. A lot of people were telling me that in the history of the University of Texas, student body presidents primarily come from Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. Coming from a hometown with 12,291 people, I didn't have that sort of base to work with in terms of contacts, connections that extended that far beyond campus. But, ran in a really tight race, spoke to 290 student organizations in 2 weeks. Didn't go to much class, just really grinded it out. And the way we ran was that we were on a ticket with 40 other people. So you had a president and vice president, then you had reps for liberal arts, comm, social work, business, and you all ran on one ticket. And so we just had a really good team, and the movement started building, and was fortunate to get that position, did that my senior year. Learned a lot, and it's one of those leadership experiences that I kind of look back on and can really take a lot of lessons and takeaways from.
That's an incredible story. And from there, you wound up at Harvard. So you get your master's in public policy and then go on to law school, which it sounds like that wasn't just by chance. You had a vision and you set out to do that from day one. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be at an institution like Harvard? You hear so much about it, but to actually be kind of in the weeds there?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit because, I wanted to go to Harvard Law School since I was 9.
Wow.
And I applied in undergrad. I got waitlisted, and so that wasn't the plan. I wanted to go in and be a part of the class. That would have been 2004, but didn't get in. So a mentor of mine actually got a job for me. I was working for Joe Lieberman in DC. Didn't really want to be there initially, but got to DC and loved it. Was also there for 9/11. And so, one of the takeaways I think just for life is that sometimes, the detours aren't detours. They're actually destinations. Like that's where you should be at that time. And I took so much from, I worked there for around 18 months, and it was incredible to see how a Senate office worked, what politics looked like. And I was reapplying to Harvard every year, Harvard Law School. I got waitlisted again. So I had deferred the Kennedy School. I went into the Kennedy School in '02, reapplied to Harvard Law School, got waitlisted a fourth time, finally got in 2004. Look, the class at Harvard Law School is around 550 people. I would say of all the environments I've been a part of, it is the most intellectually diverse place that you will find. I mean, we had surgeons, you had Navy SEALs, you had ministers, you had teachers, you had, people who were coming from very interesting narratives, and everyone was interesting in their own way. And it's not unlike many other, institutions of higher learning. I think that combination, coupled with like the leading authorities in every area of law. So if I took a class on civil procedure, I took it from Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller wrote the book on civil procedure. That was the case for most of my classes. And in Cambridge was an incredible place too. I think one of the benefits of a place like that is you're in one place, but I would take classes from Harvard Business School. I TA'd a class, a psychology class for undergrads. You're able to go to all of the speakers and the events. And so I spent 5 years in Cambridge, the most intellectually stimulating of my life. And I try to get back there at least once a year just to kind of rejuvenate me in a way.
That's incredible. And I'm sure they love bringing you back to speak and do commencements and things of that nature, because to see what you've gone on to do in just a short amount of time since being there is, it's incredible. And I'm sure you'll continue to have that relationship with them too.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask, to go to Harvard for law school and kind of be heading down this path, maybe future governor of Texas, maybe future president. And then you kind of have this strong pivot towards football. And you write almost 200 letters to the head coaches and coordinators in the NFL. And where did that come from?
The summer before my last year of law school, a buddy of mine asked me to go with him to a football camp at the University of South Carolina, Steve Spurrier camp. I was just going to ride along with him. I got there. A coach didn't show up. I filled in for the coach, coached sixth graders for 3 days, realized how much I loved football and wanted to be a coach. And so really it was the byproduct of a summer that I had some spare time before my last year. Wasn't really planning on making a pivot at that point in my life, but the experience for me I knew it was the right decision for me. I'll say one thing, most people at the time were saying, oh, you're wasting your law school career and, you'll never be able to get back. And I think that one lesson that I've learned is that, there are very few points of no return. I think at any point in your life where you're thinking, oh, I could never go back and do something else, this is the ripest season on the planet and like in the history of mankind for people to be able to pivot. And so, one, I knew that legal issues weren't going anywhere. If I wanted to be a lawyer, I still could. But I also knew that if I could get an internship with an NFL or college team, that was a much more rare opportunity than going and practicing law. And so I wrote a letter to every team. All of them rejected me in the NFL, but one, and Herm Edwards with the Chiefs gave me the yes.
Man, Herm, one of my all-time favorite coaches, and he's at Arizona State now, but what a guy, what a stand-up citizen. And in Kansas City, that's a great place to be. So what was your experience like coming in as a training camp intern?
Yeah, I was the grunt. So I just lived at Arrowhead 24/7. People needed an errand run. I was their guy. I picked up people from the airport, picked up food, took players to the doctor's office, cleaned up after practice, helped set up practice. Basically, I was just a gopher, and whatever they needed, I did. And, for me, as someone who was trying to build credibility in this space, nothing that I did at Harvard Law School really mattered to the coaches. They wanted to see what I could contribute from a football perspective. And so my main objective at the very beginning, when I first walked into Arrowhead, was just to be readily available, coachable, quiet, and just soak up as much as I could, but always be offering free labor at any point. So every morning, go around to every coach's office. Hey, do you need anything? Hey, can I do anything for you? Hey, can I do anything for you? Over time, those no's turn into, oh yeah, I got this project. And I spent 6 months doing that for the '07 season. Herm originally brought me in for training camp. Then he allowed me, I begged him to let me stay on for the season. Finally got a chance to travel with the team, and I just kept trying to build credibility and learn. And it was also, in many ways, my first year with the Chiefs, very similar to first year at Harvard Law School. You're just trying to soak up as much content and knowledge as you can, and learn as much as you can on the fly.
Absolutely. And then you parlay that into an opportunity with the Detroit Lions and West Virginia as an inside receivers coach, a cornerbacks coach, working with Stedman Bailey, Tavon Austin, and ultimately with the Cleveland Browns. And what a wealth of experience you gained throughout all of those organizations. And, I'd love to dive into each one, but we don't have time for that. But, looking back on your time as an NFL coach, what is that like?
Yeah, so, as an NFL coach, my takeaways were, NFL teams are unlike private companies, Fortune 500 companies. There are no 3-year, 4-year, 10-year strategic plans. You need to win on Sunday. So there's a sense of urgency in an NFL locker room and an NFL building that's pretty remarkable. So, you're playing on a Sunday. Everyone in the world can see where you stand. How are your defensive backs doing? What does your team look like? And so you're constantly, in a very short period of time, iterating, tweaking the system so you can get a win on the next Sunday. I love that back and forth. I also learned that, one of the knocks that I would hear is that people would say, oh, like players won't respect you. And this is, I think, a lesson in general that people, regardless of what your background is, if people truly want to get better at their craft, they will trust you if you can give them valuable content, advice. And so I watched every snap of every defensive back for every team that I coached for of their previous season. So I had this diagnosis of what I thought they could do to tweak in terms of their footwork, their eye control, catching ability, how they played in the run. And I would sit down with players and go snap by snap and say, listen, I was trying to build credibility with the player to say, hey, Stedman Bailey, I know you had a great season last year. I want to show you 10 snaps from last season. If we can clean up your footwork off the line of scrimmage by just this much, you're going to see incredible growth from last year. And when you do that and it works for a guy, then you get credibility. So those were one of my takeaways. Also, a big difference between the NFL and college. In college, my 2 years in West Virginia, I had to make sure that my players were going to Psych 301, make sure they were eating. That doesn't happen in the NFL. I'm telling guys now that I work with who are transitioning from college to the pros, no one's calling you. You're not getting a wake-up call for team meetings. They're just going to find you, keep it moving. So I think that I love what college athletics offers. I do think oftentimes that the apparatus surrounding an FBS athlete is so rich. You have tutors, you have a player development person, you've got a position coach, you have a nutritionist, dietitian. Sometimes we can insulate student athletes so much that when they have to go and be somewhat independent, they don't have the experience of independence because they've been shepherded for so long. And I think that's the major transition difference I see from going, not just from college to the pros, but just from college to like real life, right? Like the landlord probably won't call you to say, oh, don't forget your rent's due in 15 days. You're just going to get a notice if you don't pay. And so I think that was the major difference, that and recruiting, right? In college, you're constantly trying to convince guys to choose you. There's no convincing in the pros. It's like, we got you. Either you're going to produce or we're going to trade you or cut you. And so it's a very different world.
That's fantastic and profound as well. I think the student athlete transition piece is something that I'm very passionate about, as well as a lot of people here at KU. And we need to make sure that we're not coddling student athletes and, just handing out everything that they need. We need to help them with financial literacy and professional development and a lot of these areas, personal branding that I know you're super passionate about. We need to help them be successful so that when they do leave, that we have full faith that they're going to thrive and not just treat them as something that can benefit us, but let's find a mutually beneficial existence for both parties.
No, absolutely. And kudos to you. You guys, I know from us both being in the Big 12, the work that you're doing on that the institution and you are doing on the student athlete development front is really remarkable. And I think that is the kind of work that definitely has to ramp up and grow and become more commonplace around the country.
Amen. And speaking of that, during this time of you working in college athletics and in the NFL, you also established a nonprofit called 4th and 1, and it's a football camp that focuses on a lot of things that we're kind of talking about here, including ACT help and things of that nature. Can you kind of tell us a little about that?
Yeah, I was at the Lions. I was watching sort of, what takes place, the Under Armour, the Nike, all these big time camps focus mainly on 40-yard dashes and vertical leaps. And I thought to myself, it'd be great to create a camp that had football, ACT prep, and 2 life skills per night. So started in my hometown, Mount Pleasant. We bring 40 kids each summer. The morning they learn yoga, we do reflections. They play football for 2 hours. They come back, they do ACT training for 4 hours. And then we teach 2 life skills per night. So dinner etiquette, dress etiquette, how to write a thank you note. We bring a police officer in to talk about sort of protocol and that relationship. And so it's been wonderful. We've had 500 young men come to the program over the last 10 years, and we're still going strong. We'll go virtual, this summer, but it's been a great experience.
I love it. And just another great example of your leadership. And that's something that I want to talk to you about today is leadership. And I'm wondering, Daron, in your opinion, what separates these strongest leaders, a guy like Chris Del Conte or Nick Saban or Bill Belichick, from maybe more of an average leader?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I think that it also depends on, when we talk about sort of good and bad leaders, I think it depends. I think it's very important to figure out what your metric is, right? So like, how does one determine who is a good leader? Is it revenue driven? Is it staff satisfaction? So I think really focusing on what the metric is that you decide for a good leader. I would say that just in general, the list could be very long. I think leaders demonstrate humility. Mm-hmm. The good leaders will be willing to admit. The good leaders will be willing to listen, and not just listen for the sake of sort of creating this belief that they are taking other people's viewpoints into account, but actually active listening. So really listening to the people on the team and finding a way to pluck what could help the team move forward and acting on it. So I think humility is an incredible feature that leaders have to have. I think the ability to communicate effectively. This is tough. I mean, this is both verbally and in the written sense. Like, do you have the ability to translate your thoughts into a way that people can understand? And I think the reason why it's extremely difficult for leaders of large organizations the next level leader will understand that the message that she translates will read and sound differently to different audiences. If I'm in an athletic department, I've got my player development group, you've got the sports, you've got coaches, you've got media, you've got attorneys, you've got marketing people. So you can't really create a one size fits all system of messaging, because those people come with different backgrounds and they all care about very different things. Your head football coach cares about something very differently than your general counsel. And so the messaging has to be tailored in such a way that each audience gets it. And I think that one of the biggest dangers and pitfalls for leaders is when they try to create a one size fits all communication model. So you have to be able to learn how to speak and how to write and how to teach in a way that reaches each of your core audiences. I think agility is important. Look at COVID-19. Look at what's happening in college sports. I mean, this will be the most difficult fall in the history of college athletics since 1918. I mean, right? I can't think of a more precarious position than what we're in now, because some of the decisions that we have to make in college athletics are going to have major repercussions. And so I think agility is vitally important, because there will be situations that you didn't sign up for, you didn't forecast, they weren't on the strategic planning, in the strategic planning PowerPoint, but you got to deal with them nonetheless.
What a gem of an answer. And so I love this idea of self-leadership, and how in order for us to effectively lead others, we need to lead ourselves in our own lives first. So I'm wondering, what does self-leadership look like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with humility again, recognizing what I don't know. So I always start from a place of, even though, I've been with myself for 41 years, there are still realizations that I come to as it relates to who is Daron Roberts. So having the humility to see where the gaps are in your own mindset, in your habits, and then being willing to fill those gaps, whether it's through content, through mentorship, right? Like saying, okay, I need to get better at this thing. Let me go to these people, these resources, these pieces of content, and create a syllabus for myself. So I always envision myself as the dean of Daron K. Roberts University, and it's my job to craft a syllabus on a monthly basis for me to get better at the things that I want to get better at. Self-leadership, I think if you do it the right way, it involves a lot of self-compassion. So Dr. Kristen Neff here at the University of Texas has done some incredible work around self-compassion. So we oftentimes are much more lenient and kinder to other people than we are with ourselves. Always tell people, be very intentional about wiretapping your brain. And what I mean by that is, eavesdrop on your own mental chatter. Like, what are you saying to yourself, right? You think of an idea you may have. You'll hear your brain say, well, oh, remember the last time you started that thing, it didn't work. Or, oh, you won't get the funding for it. Or, oh, someone's probably already doing that. So really being cognizant of your mental chatter, and also being intentional about pushing back against the negative, what I call the self-defeating stories that we tell ourselves, in order to build momentum, because we're just trying to get off the ground, right? And if we can kind of get to escape velocity, then we're on our way. So I think those are the building blocks. For me, my faith is important. It grounds me. And so many of the decisions that I make are filtered through what I believe. And I think those are sort of the building blocks from a personal standpoint of self-leadership.
I love that. And you mentioned content in there. That's another topic I wanted to talk about. You're a prolific content creator. I mean, you're like on Gary Vee's level, except Gary Vee has 100 people doing it for him. You're just doing it. You're making it happen. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the fear of judgment and scrutiny from the outside, because it's something that it's a challenge that I kind of face on a daily basis, and that a lot of times I want to share my thoughts and ideas, but I guess I let fear hold me back. And I know that's a problem a lot of people face. And you overcome that every day, every hour, every minute. And I just was hoping you could speak some truth to that.
Ooh, best question of the day, Derek, man. That's a good one. I think you had a lot of good questions. This is a good one. So this is one thing I think for people who are considering, should I post this or not, or should I create content? You need to realize how large the social media universe is. I think oftentimes we give ourselves too much credit. Like if we hit the submit or the post button, so many people will see it. So many people will disagree with it. So many people will have an issue with it. And the reality is that like people are busy and people have lives. I've got 5 kids. So when I look through social media, I'm skimming, right? I'm trying to keep 5 kids alive. And so I think that starting point is important because it should sort of put us at ease and say, look, as long as what I'm putting out into the universe is not evil or derogatory or painful, if the message doesn't orbit those negative sort of negative content, ask myself, what do I care about? Start from there and just write, right? I think you mentioned Gary Vee. I love Gary's content. I think oftentimes some of these sort of the John Gordons, the Gary V's, like we see their content, we think like, oh, he or she is just spot on all the time. I would really encourage you to, if you have the time, scroll back, way back to when the person first started on social media. And oftentimes what we're seeing is sort of the mythology grows, right? So they had punctuation errors and bad grammar, and some of their posting get many likes or reshares early on, but then the mythology grows. So I think the most important thing when it comes to creating content is first create content that you would want to consume. Like if before you hit the post submit button, if you can't say, I would want to read this, don't do it. Right? Like write for an audience of 1 initially, like what you care about. And then once you get comfortable in that phase, just keep doing it. What happens over time is it's sort of like the crowded, kind of the crowded room, the girl that cried wolf. You keep crying wolf, what's going to turn some people off and they won't turn back and listen to you. But the people who really care about wolves are going to be like, hey, she's always writing about wolves. Let me go see if she's got some content today, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to keep doing that. And the problem is that the trajectory is a slow slide, right? It's like when you're first starting out with just a few followers or none at all, like you're posting content and it's going into an abyss, and the brain's not getting the social validation that you get from likes and reshares. And you're like, oh man, it must be me, right? It must be me. I'm not good enough. This content isn't good enough. If you can fight through that resistance, eventually your crowd will find you. And I'm now at the point to where, and it took me a while to get this. I was in this position, I would say 3 to 4 years ago, like really overthinking it a bit. But now I just think about like, what do I care about right now? Juggling work, 5 kids, my relationship with my wife. What's a story from yesterday that really points to that? Boom, I go to the story and I'll write and I'll proof it and send it. But one thing I'll say too is, I know, I'm sorry, this is a long-winded answer, Derek, but you got me going.
This is great. This is great.
You got me going on content. Storytelling. Forget about filters for pictures. Forget about GIFs. Forget about all of the things that people will tell you that you care about. To this day, just take one platform, LinkedIn. Most of the all-time leading posts on LinkedIn are text-only posts, but all of them have some story and then some takeaway from the story. Like people buy stories. If you're looking at creating content and you're looking at where to start, I would dive deep into like, what are the elements of a good story? And here's the thing, people will say, well, my life's not that interesting. Everyone's life is interesting to someone. Like what you may think is mundane, to someone else, someone saying, oh my God, I'm going through the same thing. So it's storytelling, it's storytelling, it's storytelling. I'll be quiet now, Derek. I'll shut up, man.
No, that's good. This is all about you. I don't need to be talking. That is great. So another thing that I love about you and your content and what you're creating is your daily micro wins. And there's a really cool quote from Kurt Vonnegut that talks about how it's the small things in life that really end up being the big things. And it kind of seems like that might be a bit of the heart behind your initiative, but I was hoping you could talk to the people about your micro wins.
Yeah, I love Vonnegut. So I go back to the 5 kids. It's been interesting because I love them. And I think what they've taught me is that we don't have time for all of it. Like you don't have time for it all. You have to make time. People always say they want to find time. I think that's bad engineering. You've got to make time. And so for me early on, I realized I want to get better in 3 aspects of my life: work, family, and health. Like those are my 3 burners. And so it's really easy to put up sort of New Year's resolutions that are big, lofty goals. We've all heard of big, hairy, audacious goals. But most New Year's resolutions are either forgotten or broken by February the 2nd, right? And so for me, I said, okay, I need a daily practice that is small and manageable. And I want to set it up in such a way that I'm stacking the deck for me to win, right? So, for example, writing a book. That's an entirely different podcast interview, but a part of it for me is setting a daily word goal of how many words I'm going to produce each day. I want to have a better relationship with my family. That for me translates into creating experiences of time with each of the members of my family on a weekly basis so that we can share and learn more. Health. I love to run. I like to eat somewhat healthy, especially in the morning, but it slips as we get into the evenings, right? So like I'm constantly thinking of micro wins, right? These small units of victory around running and eating. Because I've found that I haven't been able to, and people have read Atomic Habits, Clear did a great job of this. And, what's the other habit book? Charles Duhigg.
Yep, The Power of Habit.
Yeah, right, those are great. I am a fan of bringing sort of the habit psychology and the minimalism, essentialism psychology together and saying, I'm going to stack the deck in my favor, pick 3 things that I want to get accomplished in one day, be honest about the marks that I hit, and then reload for the next day.
That's huge. And I know you've talked a little bit about not going for cheap likes, but creating like meaningful content and creating a legacy. And I see you do that on a daily basis. So I just want to applaud you for that because it inspires me and it makes me want to be better and be more meaningful and intentional with what I put out into the world.
No, and likewise for you. I think, Derek, from your content, what I've seen is, and this speaks to your previous question about content, there's always this sort of work personal tension, right? Like how much should I share? I'm in a professional environment, but I'm also an individual. And that's tough for people to navigate. And I don't have an answer for that because I think it looks differently depending upon what your sort of life setup is. But you've done a great job, I think, of pushing beyond the confines of your job to where like people want to see you as an individual and you allow them to do that through your post. And you mix in also some of the work, but you do that. And so we had Brene Brown here on campus to talk about courageous leadership in sports last October. I'm a fan of Brene. I think about vulnerability. I think where most people miss the mark is that this vulnerability is what hinders you hitting the submit button more than anything else. Now, I'm not a fan of oversharing, and there's no bright line to really tell what's oversharing or too much. But I think the more you kind of pull the curtain back and show the layers, the more of an impact and the more respect that people have for it.
Amen for that, man. Breaking down some stigmas and barriers. I know it's Mental Health Awareness Month in May, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. And I've been wanting to kind of share a little bit more about my mental health journey and story. And I'm in the process of trying to write something up and sharing that. And I appreciate you sharing that and everything, because it's not easy to be vulnerable, right? It's much more easy to be robotic and maybe take a quote you like and post that, but not give any context or try to relate it to life. And so vulnerability, it breeds vulnerability. That's the beautiful thing about it.
It does. You know, I wish that I could show people my inbox from LinkedIn. I mean, I've just been blessed to have people reach out and say, I'm dealing with the same issues around inadequacy, insecurity, right? Thank you so much for posting. They didn't comment on the post, but they reach out through a DM or through email. And you may also post something and you don't get any response back. I guarantee you someone somewhere is reading something that you wrote and it's triggering a response from them because they've been in that exact position in life, and it's helping them. And so that's why I think also, like, not assigning too much value and weight to the likes and the external metrics. You know, I just hit 30,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I really had to step back and say, this doesn't really mean anything, right? Like, it's a number, but I wanted, in my post, I wanted to say to people, like, I've really become a better person because of my LinkedIn relationships. Like, there are some relationships I've built with people and whom I've never met, but what they share helps me to become a better professor, father, director. And so the world needs us to share.
Yes, sir. Daron, I want to commend you for everything that you've done and continue to do in just 41 years, man. I mean, you've broken barriers and overcome obstacles. You're such an inspiration. You impact thousands of people every single day, digitally and in person, you know, because you are a professor at the University of Texas. And I just want to thank you for sharing some of your very valuable time with us today. I wish we had more time to dive into some other topics, mindset and your Leadership Institute. But I have a feeling that there might be another day that we're able to hop on and continue building together.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Hopefully, if you are, I know, you know, when school starts, it's a different world for you as well. But I'm like committed to getting this book done by the end of the year. So if you have space for me at the end of the year, then would love to come back and kind of share my journey on the writing piece and anything else that you think would be of value.
Absolutely. And I mean, so you already have an amazing book called Audible, which everybody should read. Can you give us a little glimpse into the book that you've been grinding on as of late?
Yeah, this book it's called The Micro-Win Mindset. And so it's a mix of the psychology behind breaking big goals down into small steps, but also it provides like a roadmap to what we discussed, like this daily micro-win system. How can you implement it into your own life? And I keep coming up with realizations. Like I just, last week, I posted, you know, it was a post that basically my 3 micro wins were to breathe, breathe, and breathe. Because I just kind of felt my, you know, the temperature gauge on my mental apparatus was overheating, emotional apparatus was overheating. And I thought to myself, as someone who believes in breathing and taking breaks, I wasn't doing that myself. And so I've also put that into the system. Like there have to be days where you give yourself room to breathe, like intentionally. And so, yeah, would love to, jump back on, man. We'll have this discussion. And again, my wife's a Jayhawk, 2 degrees from the University of Kansas. And so I'll be honest with you. So I had said I wasn't going to do any more podcasts to write. And I'm talking to my wife, and she's, I just happened to mention, I love his content. He's at KU. She's like, you're doing it. I said, well, what about my commitments, my time commitments? Because I write up contracts with myself. I have time contracts with myself.
Wow.
Where I say for the period of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I'm committing myself to not do XYZ in order to be able to do A, right? And I shared that with my wife so she can sort of hold me accountable. And she's like, yeah. There's always an exit clause. So, and I'm so glad we did. I'm so glad we did. This has been a lot of fun.
Me too. Rock chalk to her. And thank you so much for your time. You have such a way with words, and I'm so excited to read this new book and continue following you. And I really do feel as if you're a mentor in my life. So thank you for everything. You're such a blessing to so many people. So hope you have an awesome day.
How old are you? I'm going to ask a personal question. How old are you?
I'm 28.
Listen, man, I wish, Derek, I'm honest, I wish I was this emotionally developed at 28 as you are. So keep doing what you're doing. Is all I'm going to say. I mean, we both have a lot to learn, but this trajectory that you're on, and I'm not just talking about from a professional standpoint, but this emotional and mental and wellness trajectory that you're on is just going to yield incredible benefits over time. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Will do. Appreciate you.
Likewise.
All right.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.